So good morning to everyone. I would like to start the session actually with, as we're talking about climate change, I think it's important that we remember our kind of brothers and sisters in Brazil, because there's been terrible weather events actually with floods everywhere, and I do think that it's important that we remember that climate change is here. It's a reality, and it can happen to any of us. So you will see that there's a campaign to raise funds for our brothers and sisters from South Summit, Brazil. So just to say this. And now I'll start with the panel. Thank you very much for being here. I'll do a brief introduction of each of you. I think it's important, or it's better afterwards, that they get to know you while you're speaking, no? So that I don't speak so much. So we have Martin Schwab in the middle. Hello, Martin. He's co-founder of Ocean-Born Foundation and CEO of Ocean-Born Impact, where he leads initiatives focused on sustainability and impactful investing. He has a robust background in private equity, having invested across various sectors. Welcome.
Thank you.
So afterwards here, Matthias Wilkström. I hope I said it right. He's kind of, how is it?
Wikström.
Wikström.
It was very close, though.
Close. CEO of The Economy, a company at the forefront of climate-focused financial technology, and the purpose of the company is to support individuals and businesses to measure and reduce their carbon footprints, driving positive environmental change. So welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have Nick de la Forge. Yes, that's easy. So he's the co-founder and general partner at Planet A Ventures. This is a leading European green tech fund with a background in he has a background in industrial engineering and deep tech, and his mission is to foster sustainable technological innovations at Planet A. So welcome to the three of you. Actually, three entrepreneurs, yeah, which is a passion, I guess, in your lives. I don't know if you want to start breaking the ice, sharing with me how is it that you started the companies and what did you invest in? And maybe I'll start with Nick. He's the youngest, and it's the opposite that anyone would expect.
How do you know I'm the youngest? Yeah, happily. So my road to Planet A basically came through me spending the first half of my career in Web3, and everything was fun and games, and kind of was at the intersection of Web3, AI, and IoT. So a lot of buzzwords, traveling the world and getting to build my own network. And then in around 2019, I started to talk to a lot of entrepreneurs in the European ecosystem, and I really started to, one, understand that this is really real, that this was coming our way, and at the same time that I was part of a group that really bears, on the one hand, incredible privilege, and on the other hand, is the most capable of actually facilitating change. And at the same time, it was quite obvious that the existing financing infrastructure wasn't really paying a lot of attention to climate tech, deep tech, or green tech, however you want to call it, and that's where the idea of Planet A originated. And then what we started off with was to say, somehow something in our economy is not really going right, and we need to pay more attention to science, and what science tells us is the right thing. And that's why we set Planet A up in a way that we have our own science team. We'll calculate something called life cycle assessments whenever we invest, so we really know what is the extrapolated state of that technology in the world, and is it really doing good, not only on CO2 emissions, but also on saving waste, saving resources, and biodiversity protection.
So Nick is talking about economy, social impacts, and science-based targets, because everything is connected, no? Which is our theme of interconnected systems. And maybe afterwards we can dive into those dimensions, which is super interesting. I don't know, Matthias, maybe you want to go now with your experience as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, sure, thank you. Firstly,
great to be back at South Summit. Every time I'm amazed by the high level of speakers, so it makes me feel a bit nervous. Like, oh no, now they're going to get disappointed.
That's because you're also high level.
Oh, no. But I'm trying. I'm doing my best. No, so I think, to me, entrepreneurship comes down to making it work. I am excited about making things work. And I don't think it is working. And why the environment? I read a quote yesterday, so it's not me saying this, but someone asked this person, why are you so engaged in the environment? Well, I live there. And I think you live one life, right? You can decide what you want to do with your life. Do you want to make a lot of money? Do you want to have a lot of fun? Do you want to have a positive impact on what is to come? And I woke up many years ago. My daughter just turned 18. I woke up when she was 2 in the middle of the night because of her. And I was sitting there thinking, what am I going to do about this? We need to contribute with what we can. And I was at the time working in service design and brand strategy. And we set up Duconomy quite shortly after that, me and my co-founder, Johan Pihl. And to me, it all comes down to living the dream in 3 different verticals. So looking at what we do in innovation, which is, of course, equally as painful as it is interesting. Because if you're looking at, you have innovation, and then you have collaboration. And collaboration, I think, is critical to whatever we are going to do. If we're going to get shit done, we need to do it together. We got into this mess together, we can only get out of it together. So the third part, which is perhaps the most tricky one, is integrity. Because nothing of this matters unless we do it with integrity. And integrity in how we measure, how we act, how we reduce, and how we enable. How you help me and how I help you. And I loved your introduction around Brazil. And I think we should all think about the fact that we are very well off in this specific room right now. But I have a close friend working at the Union of Concerned Scientists in Cambridge, Erica Spanger-Siegfried, and she said, Matthias, there is no hurricane season. There is no fire season. There is no drought season. It all comes down to fear season. And when we look at that and we conclude that there is a fear season in the world, I think it is on each and everyone's responsibility to give each other a hand.
Yeah, I agree with that. And actually, you raised a very important point, which is collaboration. Martin announcing actually yesterday in LinkedIn that you were going to participate here. Your post was about collaboration and the importance of the network, in the green tech space. I don't know if you want to share with you some insights on your beginnings and how this collaboration is so important.
Yeah, I think, look, we started thinking about setting up the foundation and everything that goes along with it when that now famous or infamous IPCC report came out that basically said we were all going to die. And you kind of realize that without focusing on climate change, there's nothing else. And so whether we are looking at women's issues, whether you're looking at children's issues, whether you're looking at health issues, whether you're looking at whatever it might be, none of that is relevant if we don't fix the world's climate. And that realization really kind of drove us to then start up the foundation and start up the various business units that we have in the foundation that act as a long-term endowment for the foundation. But the other thing you very quickly realize that really is what gets you out of bed every day is that there's many people who think like you. Not enough, but many and ever increasing. And I think, the fact that we are in this together and that, as Matthias says, we got into this mess together, we need to get out of it together, and the realization that we all bring different skills to the table, we all bring different points of view to the table, we all bring a different angle to the table, and it's really that accumulation of skills, angles, diversity of thought that is going to get us through this, and it's the only way that we can. And so from our perspective, The more people we can meet, the more people we can collaborate with, the more people we can support, the more people we can accelerate, the more we can all together try and fix this issue that we've gotten ourselves into. At the end of the day, we all inhabit the same small blue dot, and that is planet Earth. And if we don't realize that we're all on the same spaceship together, we're going to fail.
Completely right.
Can I also react?
Yes,
Very
please.
short one. I love this because what it says opportunity. Opportunity to become the better people we can be. Opportunity to come out of this crisis not only together, but at a level that is higher in regards to integrity, in regards to respect, not only for each other, but also for this pale blue dot. I love that. It resonates very strongly with me, and I think that's also something that I find very important, to be inspired by every other one's journey in moving forward, because sometimes it's tough.
It is. I also would like to pick on two topics that come out of Martin's answer. One is diversity, and the other is measuring. And you said opportunity. Okay, so I'm going to mix two of them, which is measuring and opportunity, and we talked behind. Are you for profit? Are you not for profit? So what are the metrics that you look at? And maybe this question could be for Nick or for Martin, or one and after the other. What are the metrics that you look for? The theory of change, let's say. And how do you measure this? How do you measure things that are intangible, or kind of like diversity can be women, men, okay? And we'll also talk about women later. But do you have an idea, or do you have a process, a methodology? What is it you follow? So that you have not only economic impact, which is important, but also social impacts, environmental impacts, and so on.
Maybe I start.
Okay.
So we didn't try to reinvent the wheel. We basically took the framework of a fellow Swedish scientist called Rockström. We are looking at the planetary boundaries. And the planetary boundaries, they're really interesting. There is 9 planetary boundaries in total, and climate change is one of them, but it's only one of them. And the rest is around nitrogen and phosphorus pollution, around how quickly species go extinct, and so on. And we believe, we basically follow Rockström in his thesis that we are running into an everything crisis, and that we are not only interconnected in how we as humans collaborate, but kind of that kind of very powerful picture of how humans see nature, which is us in the middle, and then animals around us, and how nature sees nature, which is like a circle of us being in that same circle. And we think that we are kind of in a transition right now of transforming everything we do, from how we produce energy, how we store it, how we get from A to B, how we produce food, how we produce clothing, and so on. And when we reset it up, what we have to do anyways, why don't we make it right this time? And why don't we take into account all of those other planetary boundaries and really try to understand and make sure that whatever we choose as the solution of the future is really sustainable in all different kinds of forms. So not only focusing on CO2 emissions, but also looking at water consumption, looking at how much waste is being created in the process. And as I said, we're using life cycle assessments for that. That's nothing we created, but it's basically a very holistic way of looking onto the entire emissions that are connected to sourcing of the raw material, to the production emissions, the transportation emissions, the use phase, and the end of life. And yeah, it will be light. That's what we thought as well. Ta-da. And it kind of allows us, and we do that consequential, so systemically. So we know that in order to create a new product, we also have to take something out of the ecosystem somewhere else, and this needs to come from somewhere, and we need to account for that. So to take that really broad picture of understanding, does it do good? Yes, that's great, but does it also do no harm in any other regard, or very little harm that we can live with?
So building on also what Nick was saying, and I know there's a huge backlash against sustainability investing, in Europe, in the US, and so on. But is it more profitable, or can we make it more profitable so that it's attractive and an opportunity? Because
we have to.
Yes. So it's difficult.
I mean, look, we have 4 business units in the foundation. All of them are for profit, and we try and make as much profit as possible. Why? Because they're all 100% owned by the foundation, and that allows us to then provide the support to all the projects that we support globally. But until we make at least as much market return, or as much return as the average market return in sustainable investing, we're not going to save the world's climate crisis. Because at the end of the day, it's about capital flowing into the space. And capital will only flow into the space if we can prove that we can invest in this space, that we can invest in climate change profitably, and ideally at a rate of return that is higher than the market. And that is the fundamental tenet of what we as climate investors need to look at. Because the days of putting out concessionary capital or of telling people you need to sacrifice return for impact, those are over. They have to be over. Because we're never going to get capital into the space on scale until we do that. And if you look at the ocean space specifically, to get the oceans back to balance, we need $180 billion a year. We're putting about $10 billion a year in right now. We're not going to attract that market gap, that funding gap, if we don't generate market returns in this space.
Maybe just one quick comment on this. I think, like, when I started Planet A, I heard this a lot. I'm not hearing this a lot anymore. Like, most of the LPs, so that's our investors, they kind of understood the message. And to just give one quick fact, the 4 largest rounds in venture capital that have been raised last year have been in green tech. So I think we are there, and I think more institutional capital understands that this is the case. Surely it's not 100%, and it's very focused on climate right now, but there is movement.
Yeah, and for example, at the university, we try to put this also as a strategy to understand your risks. No, so it's a risk mitigation strategy. I was thinking, Matthias, you started the economy 4 years ago, okay? Kind of, okay. So what are other ingredients that push this transition? I'm thinking, like, has regulation helped you? Okay, because the incentives and so on, no? So for your clients, I guess this is important. So you are a tool that helps them comply and do things better. Or how do you see this?
Yeah, so number one, coming back to what Martin and Nick said, it is instrumental. And if you leave this remembering only one thing, I think it is instrumental that it needs to be profitable to save the world, because if it is, it will be saved in no time. It needs to be profitable in order to be sustainable. We've tried all of the other ways for many, many generations, and it hasn't worked, right? So we need to direct capital, we need to direct efforts, and we need to benefit from the consequences thereof. We see that, coming back to your question, out of a regulatory perspective, primarily in Europe. And Europe is like, yeah, let's make regulations around this, and that's good, because every market needs to adhere to rules, right? And rules comes out of policy, and that's why the US right now is in a bit of a flux, because they are not sure what kind of policy that will be in place or in what kind of building their president will be. But we'll see about that, right? So in the US, they're putting a big pile of cash on the table saying, hey, market, go solve it, called Inflation Reduction Act. And that's worked really well in the sense that it's created a lot of jobs, and the energy transition is picking up. We see now in Texas, 30% of the energy use is from renewable, and that's not because they like renewable, it's because it's cheaper. It's a cash economy.
Yeah.
It's profitable, right? I'll buy that or that, and that's cheaper, and it gets me the same value. I'll go for the cheaper. So I think we are already seeing this. We also have to recognize the positive effects of this. And coming back to Johan Rockström's research at the Potsdam Institute on the planetary boundaries, I think that's also a great framework, because coming back to your question about regulation, what that is stemmed out of is narrative. Because the narrative that we need to put in place in order to become what good looks like, which, by the way, coming back to equality, children, we need to run this at full capacity, right? And the outlining of the planetary boundaries, I do strongly encourage everyone to look into it, shows us in a very detailed way what our narrative need to explain to us, what our leaders need to explain to us and engage us in in order to progress further. So I think, to me, regulation has absolutely been favorable to the economy in regards of the different requests for data and measurement coming in on corporate and product level. However, I still feel that the overall narrative is missing. So we're sort of doing regulation a little bit in the dark because we don't know exactly what policies to stick that regulation to, and that makes it less of a success so far, I think.
Yes, and you brought up the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which basically is an incentive for investments, clean investments in the United States, and it's created hundreds of job placements, amazing, and attracted investments there, no? And it's kind of, Europe is kind of missing the opportunity somehow. Well, there's lots of criticism around that.
We're like eating the cake from two different sides, I think.
Yes, two perspectives, no?
Yes.
Two approaches to the same problem. Have you, for example, found this IRI interesting, and has that moved your interest to invest in projects in the US? Has that changed?
I mean, I've been investing in the US all my career, and so as we think about our activities, we're very much focused in equal measure between Europe and North America. They're two very different markets, not just because of the IRA, but also because of their approach, because of how the capital markets act in each of those geographies. Both sides of the Atlantic bring positives and negatives in terms of their market, but the ability for us to really be able to support and accelerate projects on both sides of the Atlantic is a huge benefit, and really allows us to look at opportunities in both markets.
Okay, so diversity is good also in that sense.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is, if you look at the technology approach between Europe and the United States, Europe tends to be a lot more incremental in its approach. In the US, you get the disruptive technology approach, and both are important, it's just a very different kind of market. It's a very different approach to things. Of course, there's a lot more capital, and it's a lot more available in the US than it is in Europe, but that also brings a lot of opportunity for Europe. And so, they're just very different markets, and the ability to be able to navigate both markets and really play on the strengths of both markets, I think, is hugely important.
That's great. I don't know, Nick, if you want to add anything, or your investment preferences or strategy, US, EU?
Not a lot. So we don't invest in the US. What we see is that a lot of our portfolio companies are going to the US. And it's interesting because structurally the incentive schemes in Europe and the US are not that different. For example, if you look at incentivization to get like green premiums on a kilogram of hydrogen or so, but the ease with which companies can tap into those subsidies in the US is so much higher. And in Europe, it's just utterly impossible, or it takes you much more than your runway. And so this is, I think, Europe at its finest.
No, that's good. And you were saying something, Martin, and I would like Matthias maybe to comment on that, about the technology, how it's different, the type of technology that you find in Europe and the US. Oftentimes we hear that the barrier to this sustainable transition is technology. Other times we hear that, no, the technology is already here, and it's another issue that we're facing. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, I think that I agree with the incremental versus the radical. However, for us working primarily with financial services and financial institutions, we see a slightly different segmentation where emerging markets have banks with younger technology platforms that are not a tapestry of old M&A activities, and the back end of banks is just a complete mess if it's a legacy bank, right? younger economies, younger financial institutions got it right from day one. It makes it easier for us to work with, faster to go to market, hence shorter time to profitability. So I think that's also one way of looking at it on a tech perspective, leapfrogging with new economies, and I think that has served us really well.
That's great. So before we wrap up, I wanted to, we had a conversation, Matthias and myself. He was saying, how can it be that we are only 3 men, there's no diversity in the panel? And I have to raise that this is a concern. Actually, you were talking about financial services. The majority of is governed by men, mainly. There are not so many women entrepreneurs either. I don't know why, okay, but there are lots of studies. So I do think that this is important that we raise that we believe in diversity, but we also believe in talent, and that's why we're here talking about this. But we wanted to share these insights with you, no?
Yeah, no, I think it corresponds with what Martin said earlier. We need to address this at full capacity. Climate crisis is at the very easiest form. It's a human rights issue, but it's also a human's potential issue. And if we don't address this at full capacity, believe that only half of the planet's population is going to sort this out, it's not going to work. It's not only about equality and equal rights, it's about getting shit done and getting everyone involved. So women, next year, I'm hoping that we will see every other person on here not being a grumpy old middle-aged man like the 3 of us, no matter how talented we are.
Well, I think it's been fantastic having you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let's continue with South Summit. Thank you.